Hey everyone, so whether you're joining us live, and thank you for those who are joining us live, or if you are watching or listening to the recording, it's a pleasure to have you here. If you are live, you have any questions, please do feel free to chip in along the way. We'll also come back to the room after 45 minutes just to kind of grab any questions live you want to throw to myself or Zoe. If you are watching on or listening on the recording, then we'll give you a place to reach us right at the end of the session so that you will not be left hanging. Because if our role is to give you the ammunition of more better questions, we're not going to leave you hanging. That'd be like really cruel, wouldn't it? So, but we are talking about something which is really, really important. Something I'm really passionate about. Something that I've had my own experiences with, and also Zoe has as well. And how myself and Zoe usually position these kind of sessions that we deliver. We do lots of this together. I act as the host. I play the dumb guy. I'm good at that kind of stuff. And then I throw the questions to Zoe as my solution-focused friend. And we'll kind of really have an open conversation about this, but from a lived experience perspective, but also from Zoe's perspective as well. So there's a quick introduction. Zoe, do you want to take the lead? Tell us who you are, where you're from, think like you're on the chase, that kind of thing.
Oh, see, my mind went to Cilla Black, but so that's clearly showing my age. Who am I and where am I come from? So I'm in Bristol, born and bred, as you can probably tell from the accent. So I work as a coach and trainer, and I help people find aligned success in life, in leadership, and in business. So the best way to describe that is to find success that feels as good as it looks, because I think most of us will have had periods of life where it all looks very good on paper and it doesn't feel like we want it to. So I help people with habits and behaviors to be successful, but in a way that aligns with what's most important for them.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you. And now my printer has decided to clean itself right in the
I can't hear it.
Hopefully the sound cancelling is working well. Always best to be honest, you know this. So anyway, hello, my name is Nick. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. Yes, it's a proper job, is your first question. It's been my job for around 12 years, sharing my experiences of mental illness and mental health challenges to help increase engagement in the initiatives and solutions in practitioners like Zoe that are out there right now. So I focus exclusively on engagement. I tend to get airdropped in as the person to try and reach people that cannot be reached on this stuff. So we both do a lot of work in prisons, in schools, in businesses, as well as the frontline environments as well. So wherever you are coming to us from, we will have experience in working within your area, and we're keen to share whatever we have with you. Just to stress, we are doing this exclusively for the Marmalade Trust and supporting the work they're doing around loneliness. There is no commercial aspect to this. We are not here to sell anything. We are not charging. You can have the content completely for free. It will be available through YouTube and stuff afterwards as well. So this is purely just a human experience because we are tackling a human condition, and that is loneliness. It's a big old word, isn't it?
Mm, it
I think
is.
I think I'll be honest. The first thing that really came to mind is that I kind of asked myself the question, am I lonely? Which sounds a strange question because being in front of, I don't know, potentially thousands of people every week. Um, but that's kind of the thing. I'm in front of people. I'm not really around people. I'm not really immersing myself in people. And some of that's through choice as an introvert, as you know, I'm the person that kind of hangs around the corner while Zoe kind of talks to everybody else at our events and that kind of stuff. But some of it actually, I only really feel kind of that loneliness feeling goes when you're around people that you know, people that are friends, people that are family, and that kind of stuff. So you can actually be lonely and also be surrounded by people as well. And I think that's a really good launch pad, I think, for this conversation.
Mm, that's a great starting point because you can be alone and not feel lonely.
Mm,
And you can not be alone and feel lonely. And I think for me, it's the disconnect. It is around, and I think you just said that right there. It's about meaningful connections. It's connections that have value, connections that have that kind of 360 degree. We give, we take, we give. Yeah, and that we're able to connect with people on multiple layers. And I think it can be really easy, especially in this day and age, especially with online connections. We can connect at that very top layer, very surface level, and we don't necessarily get to know people, what goes on under the surface. And it is those meaningful connections, where there's shared values, there's that level of trust, there's that level of of just engagement that I mean really is meaningful. And I think there's a lot of surface level connections out there. There's a lot of people who look, very well connected, and they might be in terms of quantity.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're quality connections.
And we certainly see that a lot from, we both met through kind of things like business networking and stuff. And it's very much back in the day, very much a numbers game, wasn't it, in that sense? And it's, you kind of only recognize that when you take a step back. I think, and people may have been surprised to hear me mention that I'm an introvert. I mean, by the definition of I recharge in my own company. Somebody asked me, shout out to Mark Deeks actually, kind of asked me on this event listing on LinkedIn this morning around kind of loneliness and how does somebody know when they're lonely or they just choose to be alone. I think it's such a great question because my definition of being an introvert is I love what I do, I'm successful at what I do, and I can perform very well at what I do, but I still want to kind of go and crawl away in a dark corner somewhere afterwards and recharge because it's kind of how your energy goes, isn't it? I am drained by being around people all the time, but an extrovert would feel the exact opposite as well. So it's a really interesting kind of point, isn't it? That kind of where you fit on that scale. Because I know, and I think for me, it's heaviness. I think for me, it's recognizing that when I'm alone and I've been alone too much, I feel heaviness. When I've been around people too much, I feel heaviness. So for me, that's kind of the tell. But I guess what do you see, both personally and also with the clients you work with? What's the kind of the tell between you need alone time and you feel lonely?
And I think what you're describing is very common. And I think to go by feeling is probably a good measure. This is not going to be the same for everybody. It's not going to be, ticking the box criterion and this and that is that. I think, yeah, I too would describe myself as an introvert, although the more I read up on it, the more I find out about it, the more I think perhaps I'm more ambivert, because actually my tolerance levels, I think they're higher than yours. I mean, I certainly, when we do events together, I can see like that battery just like that last hour, and I'll be looking at you, go, come on, Nick, just get over that line, and I can see that last half hour, it just where I think also you are giving your energy out to people in the room, and I think that also makes a difference. So I think it's not about confidence. It's not about your level of being able to socialize and being able to engage with people. A lot of people will talk about it, shyness or awkwardness, and it's not that. It is just how quickly your battery drains. But I think also the nature of your work, you talk about things that are very personal to you. You are giving energy. You can see, when we do events together, I see you giving that energy. Whereas I think the work that I do, it's much more about holding that space for people to give that energy. So I think it feels very different, but I think it is about feeling. And I think it's also knowing that you have people that you could reach out to when you're ready.
Yeah.
So you're not sitting in that room, recharging and thinking, actually, I don't even have anyone that I can talk to. You are making a very conscious decision that this is where I need to be, this is how I need to be to get my energy back up. And when you are back up, you know exactly who you can reach out to. You appear back online, you have those conversations. If somebody was to reach out to you, you're able to give that energy again. So I think you're also recharging for yourself, you're also recharging for other people. So I think it is very much a feeling, and I think it is knowing that you've got those connections there. So it's not loneliness. You are alone with purpose, with intention, for a reason, rather than that unintentional, mindless being alone. And I think from in my point of view, I think is a very clear difference.
I also want to talk about, we were talking about tells and also that mindless kind of element that when it comes to things like distraction techniques that for example, binging that Netflix series that I could quite easily binge a Netflix series, but actually, if I'm not feeling too good, you're kind of there and you're watching it, but you're not really as invested. So it's not even the task that you're doing to alleviate that kind of feeling of loneliness. It's about how you're immersing in something. I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about kind of its link with things like grief and other mental health kind of factors, and even I guess into neurodiversity as well. This that's a massive impact on how we experience loneliness as well. What's been your experience, kind of, and I guess not just for the individuals, but also you work in cultures, you work in organizations and businesses doing this stuff. So, what do you see as the kind of coming through from people that you're working with along those kind of levels as well, and distraction techniques and also other factors?
And I think with distraction techniques, it's recognizing, again, you use the word immersion, so I think that's a good word to use. But I think it's also that mindfulness. Like, if you are watching Netflix, are you watching Netflix, or is Netflix on in the background and you're scrolling on your phone, or doing something else? So I think, for me, June's a very busy month. Got lots of really exciting stuff going on, but I know I need to protect my energy around that. So one of the things I have chosen to do this month is to not watch Netflix, to not watch, not have a visual watch, because for me it's something I'm watching while I'm doing something else, but it means I'm not really watching it, and I find that it does drain my energy. So I'm kind of closing that off. So I think there's a mindfulness around it. Like, if you are watching it, are you watching it, or is it there? I've spoken to lots of people who will have it on because they don't like the quiet. They don't like the quiet of just being by themselves, and so for them it's company. The radio or music or Netflix is, the sound of other people talking on some level brings them that sense of company. So I think just that awareness can be really important of, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what's the intention behind this? What's the sense of purpose around this? I think it's a great question for most things that we do in life. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I know you talk about this too. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this in this way? So I think sometimes it is a distraction, it is noise, it is company. I think it's lots of different things for different people. But if you want meaningful connection and you want company, then think about who you might be able to pick up the phone to, or what groups are you in online where you can have a level of engagement that feels more meaningful, that feels that you're able to connect one-to-one with people. And I think that's the difference. Social media, it's great having 10,000 followers or 1 million followers, but it's a very one-way connection. You are giving and they are receiving, but there isn't a connection in the middle. So I think, Facebook groups online or social groups online where you actually have a two-way conversation, that in my mind is going to be much more of a healthy connection than putting content out to millions of followers and not really getting any kind of sense of purpose around it.
So this is exactly the reason why we didn't script this, because our conversations always go on a different tangent.
Who knows where it's going to go?
But in the same breath, if I throw anything at you that we just don't know, then we'll just tell you we don't know stuff as well. And the same with any questions we get through today as well. But you just mentioned something there, which I think is really important. And I think actually one of those elements of technology is social media. As you know, from a mental health, I quote the Harvard reference of between 18 and 29-year-olds, social media is the biggest source of anxiety. But in the same survey with the same demographic, it was the biggest source of positive community. So again, it comes back to immersion. It's not what we immerse ourselves. It's not what we scroll through or scroll on. It's about actually how we immerse our time. But people very often post for inspiration or desperation, very rarely in between. But if you're sat at home, for example, alone, making those comparisons, things like FOMO, that fear of missing out, things like thinking about, well, why have they got this and I haven't? Actually, you're comparing one spun version of the truth against somebody else's spun version of the truth. But that can really have a damaging effect. And I know we see this certainly in student generations in the work we do, but also to any person of any age, having that kind of superficiality or that kind of I don't know, that kind of such a wrong point of comparison, that can be really damaging.
And it's not just the comparison, it's how we feel when we do it. So even when there's that logical part of our brain that says that's not real, that's their very polished shop front window version of the truth versus what we know the reality is. It is very, very different, but how we feel when we consume that is very real. Even when when there's a distance, our brain isn't able to work out the difference between what we're seeing and what is real, what is fiction. What we feel in that moment as we scroll through is a very real emotional response, and it will be that mental emotional response of the conversation, that internal dialogue that then starts, and it will be a very physical response of how we feel, whether that's the raised heart rate or whatever that is for us. That is very, very real. And it's very hard to bring us back down to that neutral state. So we can give ourselves a very real stress response by what we consume. So it's so important to filter out what we're digesting. And I think it may feel in the moment like, okay, well, this is a little bit of company or it's a distraction, but often can make us feel a lot worse. So I think it's really important to think about who we're connecting with when we log into our phones and make sure that we are connecting in places that help us to feel better, because we can do both. We can pick up our phone and we can choose either, or we can choose to feel better, or we can ultimately not make a conscious choice and probably end up feeling worse as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do seem to be kind of trundling into this kind of era of kind of superficiality in that sense, and we both know that stories matter. Storytelling drives everything. The reason I purely focus on lived experience is because I think it's the perfect vehicle to drive engagement to help. But even on LinkedIn for this morning, I just kind of fresh off the holiday, I caught up on my new connection to say, hey, if you need any help, just give me a shout. Very personal message. It's not rinse and repeat. But the amount of people to come back and say, oh, you didn't pitch, or oh, thanks for the human kind of good. But to me, that's just kind of like, it should be like a given. But I think, especially kind of with the advance of things like AI, and again, I'm not anti-AI at all. I think it's an amazing thing if used in the right way, but it cannot replace the need for our human desire for storytelling and humanity. And because, like I said, we want to see what other people are experiencing, and we're both very open around the adversities and the successes, so that people can kind of really relate to those kind of things. We don't really relate to superficiality, do we? I think there's a real risk of kind of amplifying that with the advance of AI and churned out messages around standard general stuff.
Yeah, and I think when we're in a good place, I think we can see that, smell that a mile off. But when we're not, and when we're not really looking at it and we're just looking at it, I think it's very hard for us to filter it out. So I think sometimes we need to have that very conscious decision about who we choose to connect with.
Yeah.
And so then when we're not in such a great place and we do log in, it's more likely to help us to switch that state, that emotional state, in a more positive way than it is likely to, or risk dragging us further down. Because we know it's a slippery slope, isn't it? And our brain sees what we tell it we want it to see, whether we do that consciously or unconsciously. So if we're not in a great place and we are, let's say there's that, quite often it's mostly around self-worth, self-value. That's kind of, even it'll be different things on the surface level. When you kind of roll it all back, that's quite often what it comes down to. So let's use that as an example. If you are having, you're in a period of time where you don't feel that that self-esteem is low, you don't feel that self-worth, your brain is going to look for more evidence that is true, because that's what you're telling yourself, consciously or unconsciously. So you will keep seeing signs of that, whether that is through other people's value and worth that you then compare to that lack for yourself, or whether that's more you see that and you start to question that for yourself as well. So it's really important to recognize that actually when we are in those lower periods, we will see what we're looking for. And so one of the ways to come out of that is to train ourselves to start looking for something different. And certainly that's something I do quite often with people, is, we set a little bit of homework, which is people like, homework, I didn't sign up for this. But actually it's a really good way of practicing every day to go and look for what you want to see, not what your brain is looking out for you, because it will be negative and it will be the higher risk, because that's how our brain keeps us safe and keeps us alive. It's the self-preservation, self-protection nowadays is very different to how it was when the evolution of the brain is not the same as society. So we need to sometimes remind ourselves of what we want to see and what we want to look for. And so again, it's that intention and that purpose, in how we're showing up and how we're engaging with people.
You mentioned society there. By the way, this is almost seamless. Well, genuinely, we've not scripted this, but you mentioned. I was thinking I want to talk to you about society, and now you.
Well, I don't even know what questions are coming, so so far so good.
Yeah, nor do I. But I think the thing that really popped into my head was, and I've heard you speaking about this before, and again, only answer what you want to answer. But again, I'm going to ask you a question.
Go for it.
You have like society and popular media can kind of force people that they should be this, they should be in a relationship, they should be doing this, and that kind of 2.4 children. I've certainly found the same with the choice not to have children. That felt that kind of external pressure, sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle. It's the thing that people ask you about, that kind of stuff. Now you have a single lifestyle in a very powerful way. Would you mind sharing your experiences of your choice to do that, and also what loneliness means to you within that? Would that be okay? I should have asked you this before. Actually, should have.
No, it's okay. No, I don't mind sharing. I have, very similar to you. People have their own. It is a judgment. Ultimately, is what it comes down to, of what good looks like and what success looks like. And I get asked all the time, aren't you lonely? Don't you get lonely? But I've been on my own for a long time. So my son's 23 now. So I'd split with his dad when he was 4, so that's 20 odd years of certainly living alone. Haven't lived with anybody else since. And people think that I would be lonely. I travel alone. I think what works for me is that, and what I see a lot of people do, even people who are in relationships, and what, from the outside looking in looks good, looks happy, they wait for somebody else to do things with them. So they'll say like, I really want to do this, but my partner's really busy at the moment, so we'll probably do that in the summer, or I quite fancy doing this, but the other half isn't really interested. And I hear these conversations all the time, and quite often it's off the back of me saying, I just did this, and they're like, I really want to do that, but so and so. And I my kind of ethos is, I'm never waiting for somebody else to be ready for something that I'm ready for. Now, again, when we go to judgment, a lot of people will say to me that I've always, and I think sometimes I have, what would you call it, an existential crisis, where I start trying to make problems when there aren't any. Like, am I really happy? Am I okay? Or am I just telling myself that I am? Or have I been on my own too long to ever be able to step into that kind of like relationship with somebody else? And I just think, I'm just looking for problems now, and the problems are not there. I wake up happy, I go to bed happy. Do I miss out on anything? Nothing that is important to me. I think it is important to not wait to do things that you want to do for somebody else to be ready. But I do think it's a healthy position to be in when you are able to do things on your own. Anybody else who gets involved in it is a bonus. So this year I set myself the challenge to do something fun every month. So I was totally open as to what that might look like. I had a list of things that I wanted to do. And so what I did, excuse me, was messaged out friends and family members and said, this is my challenge this year. I'm going to do something every month, but I would love for you to invite me along to stuff that's fun for you. Or this is my list. If you want to jump in on anything, let me know. And some people have jumped straight in and was like, yeah, count me in for that. And then some people have said, "Oh, I'm doing this." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fun for you. I know that that's not fun for me, so that's a thanks but no thanks." And then there's also lots of things I've gone and done on my own. But if I was waiting for people to join, say, "I'm going to do something fun every month," we're in June now, and I would have done one thing.
Yeah.
Everything else is just like, "Yeah, I'm doing it." So I think there's again, I do think you make of it, you work with what you've got. I
Yeah.
think that for me has worked really well. And like I can't force I can't I mean, I've been told that Amazon don't deliver a perfect partner. And I think there's there's an element of effort required in going out. And I go out and I meet people all the time, but you
Yeah.
can't force people into a situation. So I think that there's lots of things that I do that people do as a couple and people do as single. And I don't know. For me, it's just it is what it is. I mean, and I hear you talk about things that you do with your wife, and I hear about other people talking about things they do as a couple, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. It's great. And it gives me ideas, and I think, oh, I could do that too. But I don't think I have to wait for a friend or partner or somebody else to do that with. I just think, okay, when can I do that? Look at the calendar. When can I do that too?
So Love Island 2026 starring Zoe Thompson.
Yeah, well, but we're the main character of our own story,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I can't wait for the future chapters for the next character and actually when another character steps into my storyline, I'm sure they will have an idea of what they want to do. So I'm going to make the most of having this time. Like I said, my son's 23 now. I know that he would like a partner and children, so I'm working on the assumption that there's a strong possibility at some point I'm going to have some nana duties, so that will change the dynamic. So I've got this window of time where I can do what I want. I don't have to worry about childcare, don't have to worry about fitting in around somebody else. So some people will say it's selfish, self-centered, which has a negative connotation, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being
No,
self-centered.
absolutely.
If we're the main character of our story, why are we not putting ourselves at the center of it?
No, absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Well,
I'd be interested what people watching
I love that.
feel on that.
Yeah, it's good. Um, so I want to talk about kind of community and also reaching out for help. It's so great to see that one of the amazing organizations that I signpost to, Chrysalis, are on the live call right now. Hello, guys. So, big shout out to Chrysalis. So organizations like that, they kind of they provide amazing support initiatives and they help people. Same with the work that you do in the coaching and leadership space, and all the other solution focused professionals that I work alongside, getting people to that point of help. I guess there's two angles to this. If you are somebody who's experiencing loneliness, or maybe you don't even qualify something as loneliness, because like anxiety could show up very differently than we perceive anxiety to
Mm.
be. So let's talk about that. So as an individual, if it's you, if you believe you're experiencing loneliness, how does that look? How does that feel? And how do you reach out for help? But I guess also from the other point of view, like I like you to talk about is how can we engage other people that you feel could be struggling right now, could be lonely? Do you know what one of the most human experiences I've ever had was when I was delivering for Tesco, delivering groceries, and which doesn't sound a very kind of it's not an enlightened mission. It was paying the mortgage, but it was my first week there. I delivered to a house out in the middle of nowhere. And when I took the stuff to the door, she was an elderly lady. I said, "Can I take it in? Take the deliveries in for you?" And I was putting it away for her. I was putting it in the cupboards and stuff. I'm a nice guy. um, but she
You
was
put it in
saying,
our cupboards as well.
"Yeah, I put it. Yeah,
Oh, that's extra mile.
I did get told off for that." She said because all the other drivers are saying, "Don't start doing that because we're going to have to do that." Anyway, but that's an aside. Scrap that bit. The bit that I wanted to mention was she was saying that, "Oh, are you going to be you again next week?" And I said, "Oh, I said I'm not sure." I said, "I'm not sure what the route is yet." She said, "Oh, I really hope so because you're the only people that I see every week." I said, "I really enjoyed chatting to you." I get quite emotional, so I don't know.
Oh,
And,
bless.
and she said like that's the only person she sees every week is the Tesco duck driver. And in between, she hasn't got any family, she hasn't got anybody else to reach out to. has got used to that kind of maybe solitary lifestyle, but absolutely is experiencing loneliness.
Yeah.
How do we help ourselves? How do we help other people? I know it's a big question, but
It's a big question, but it's a big problem. And you only got to look at the numbers that Marmalade are putting out this week around loneliness and how it impacts people. And, I think it's also Men's Health Week. So I think we really need to highlight the fact that actually men experience loneliness more than women statistically. And we also know that men's suicide rates are higher statistically. So we have to talk about it. It's a big topic, but it's also something that needs to be talked about. And I think we also need to work on getting to know us, because I think when we look at meaningful connections, we have to understand ourselves to be able to go out and connect with people who we then know are going to be good for us. The shared values, shared principles, shared ethics could be very different experiences, very different backgrounds, very different walks of life, but we need to have things that we can connect on. So, talked about having different layers and multiple layers, but we can only connect on multiple layers when we understand what those layers are for ourselves. So I think firstly, more work needs to be done on helping people to understand how to understand themselves. And when we work on that relationship with ourselves, it makes it much easier for us to connect with other people. However, we do also need to make sure that there are opportunities for other people to connect. So I think, if you are experiencing loneliness, it's going to feel different for different people. But I think know what it is that brings you joy. And I think this comes into that challenge, I set with very different motivations this year. But if you speak to people who talk about connecting with other people and going out and finding your people, as friends, as partners, you go where people like you are. So think about the hobbies that you have. Think about the things that you would like to be able to spend time doing. Have a look online and see where you can go and do those things, because that then takes the pressure off meeting people, but the focus is on the activity. And it's much easier to make small talk when you're doing something than it is just to sit in front of somebody face to face. But I think we're always, and I am as guilty of this as the next person, but we're always heading our phones as well. Even walking down the street, we're not looking at the people who are walking past us and saying hello. And someone said good morning to somebody the other week. He jumped out skin. But I think having conversations, because you've got like I said, I'm the first to have the big noise cancelling headphones on, and I'm quite often got my face in my phone. But if you come out of that and look around and see who's in the room, went to the gym this morning, trying to make it, I'm training with somebody else, so there's no headphone, no phone, and looking to see who else is in the gym and making small talk, saying hello, having conversations with people. I think we can do a lot more on that very low human level of just making eye contact and acknowledging that they are there. And I think that probably is, for a lot of people who talk about loneliness, they feel like they're invisible. They feel like people don't see them. And I think we need to see people more, and we need to hear people more. So I think, it's just simple things that we could all do on a daily basis is just say hello to people as we walk past them in the street, say hello, ask people how they are. I've only left the house once today to go to the gym, but there's somebody sitting on the desk at the gym. Hi, how are you? There's a young girl sitting there. She's been doing revision, bless her, for what feels like months. But it feels like months to me. So God only knows what it feels like for her. So how are the exams going? How many have you got left? Small talk. I have no idea what her name is, but I can make a small bit of conversation with her. She feels seen. She gave me an answer. She said, oh, no, they're going okay, better than I thought they were. And I was like, oh, that's great, because you said you were a little bit nervous. Now she feels heard as well. Yeah. She probably hasn't given it a second thought, let's be honest. But if she's not in a great place, that small conversation that means very little to me could mean quite a lot to her. And I think you, with the Tesco delivery, it's small talk for you,
Yeah.
it makes the world of difference to that other person. And that's what we need to remember. It's not always about us. We are the main character in our story, but we're also a character in somebody else's as well. And I think we could do that a lot more without it costing us anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly COVID and the lockdown, the pandemic kind of amplified it, but that kind of sense that the two things that we all crave are community and commonality. I think,
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with COVID was that it was the connection was taken away from us. So I think for a period of time, we valued it a lot more.
mm,
You know, when you think when the restrictions were taken away and we were able to go and see people that we hadn't been able to see, we valued people a whole lot more. But you know, we have very short-term memories, don't we, humans? And it's like we got back into that flow of normality very quickly, even though normality was different for a while. But now we probably don't pick up the phone to people, or we don't make, you know, nobody's doing Zoom. Actually, no, that's not true. I have one client who still does Zoom quizzes with their family once a week, but we're not doing half of the things that we did to make those meaningful connections during those lockdown periods. So I think, yeah, maybe we do. I think what COVID did was reminded us of what was important.
yeah,
And I think it can be very easy for us to forget that in the busyness of day to day. And I don't think that's, you know, that's not a blame and shame
no,
thing. I think, you know, we are busy, but I think it's just reminding ourselves sometimes that actually people aren't here forever. And, you know, what do we hear people talk about in terms of regret? You know, it's like, I didn't pick up the phone, or I didn't answer that last call, you know, and I think sometimes we have to step out of that moment and look at the bigger picture and reach out a little bit more to people we haven't reached out to. And yeah.
and you're talking to a country music fan here. That's a staple of all the lyrics. But, but I think you're right. I think community is also that first stepping stone for a lot of people between where they are now and a potential solutions, whether it be counseling, therapy, coaching, whatever that may be. So I think the rise of people like or groups like Talk Club, who are based
Yeah.
in Bristol. You've got Andy's Man Club,
Mm-hmm.
who did some amazing work with somebody I know very well. And it's really interesting that that community element is that kind of what people thrive on. However, there is a flip side to COVID, and I've certainly experienced this, which is huge rise in social anxiety,
Mm.
desire to kind of keep yourself away or to have fewer social engagements on a personal level as well as a professional level, but as much as you could. But so that's not a reflection on anything or anyone. That was just a feeling that inside is safe and outside isn't, because it kind of conditioned us, I guess, didn't it? So that did play into that actually,
Yeah.
but that vulnerability piece of kind of staying where you are, because again, stay home save lives. Inside is safe, outside isn't. That kind of thing has a massive impact on us, doesn't it?
Well, we also lost our resilience of being out and having busy calendars. I mean, I don't know how many people, the number of people I spoke to that would talk about, oh, it's just so nice to not have to show up to stuff on a weekend, and I can actually just sit and relax and decompress. And I think a lot of people realized that actually a slower pace was much needed. So I think certainly for a while after COVID, a lot of people made more conscious decisions about not going out as much, not getting in, you know, that fear of missing out became the joy of missing out. You know, there was a big switch around for that. And I think that was a change for people. But again, it comes down to meaningful connections, meaningful time with other people. It's not about quantity. It's not about filling your weekend. You know, if you are an introvert and you need your downtime, you know, then maybe have one event over the weekend that helps you to connect with the people that are most important to you, but also have conversations with people. I mean, my mum's an extrovert. Like, we couldn't be any further apart on that spectrum. You know, and in COVID, because my stepdad is in treatment for cancer, so they were high risk, they weren't allowed to go anywhere. Her poor neighbor, every time they came out to peg the washing out, my mum was like, out and like over the garden fence trying to have conversations with different people, and she sits and goes through her phone and calls people. Like she calls people from her primary school. She likes to talk, she likes to see how people are doing, but it's taken her quite a long time for her to understand, like, I can't call her at the end of a day,
Yeah.
like, because I've been with people all day. So I will tell her what day at the weekend is the better day, and she calls me on that. She don't care when she calls me. She just
Yeah.
wants to be
Of
able
course.
to talk. And I want to show up and be able to listen and engage and not feel resentful of the fact that I've got zero energy left, and she's talking about people who I don't know, which is what our parents do, isn't it? They tell us all about the people that we have no idea who they are.
Very
That's
true.
how they engage. And
Very
so
true.
I want to make sure that I show up for that. And so I just explain that to her, and just say, okay, this would work really, really well. So I think we have a responsibility to help people to help us. I think it's all very well sitting here and having expectations on what other people need to do, but we also need to communicate what we need from other people. Do we want more or do we want less? Do we want it like this or do we want it like that? And I think, again, this comes down to, we have to know ourselves first. We have to know what works for us first. And if we don't know, it's a trial and error. And I think that's okay too. You don't have to get it right first time.
Self-awareness seems to be the overarching kind of takeaway from this, isn't it? So that we have the answers if we ask ourselves the real questions, and kind of check in on ourselves.
Yeah. And I think self-awareness, it starts with self-awareness. I think the more self-aware we are, the more we increase our emotional intelligence to be able to pick it up in other people too.
Yeah.
I think the more we spend time thinking, okay, this is what's important, this might be important to other people, the more we start to see it in others. And I would say, certainly in my experience, the people who have the higher emotional intelligence also have the self-awareness. So I think it's easy enough to start with ourselves. I say easy enough. That can be a challenge in itself, but I think we start with ourselves, and then we then increase our awareness, and that helps us to show up better for other people as well.
Oh, it's far easier to give advice and take your own, isn't it? Right.
Oh, absolutely. Why do you think I do this? Do you think I take any of my own advice?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh no.
I think the real takeaway for me from this, and thank you so much for kind of answering so candidly, and so humanly. It's been a really great chat.
No AI answers here
No
today.
answers here, and we've got a road trip tomorrow, so I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow because we kind of covered it here with an audience, so it's all good. But I think the real takeaway for me is that kind of that pay it forward kind of element, that not
Mm.
all people that are alone are lonely, and not all people that are in front of people or around people are feeling completely happy with life and stuff. And I think it's
Don't
an
assume.
assumption, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, don't assume. Don't assume that somebody who has lots of people around them isn't lonely. And don't assume that somebody on their own wants you turning up on their doorstep unannounced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't do that.
And here's a clue for everybody here: don't turn up on my doorstep after I Find Your Voice live day. I am good for that one. So, um, so we're going to come back to the live room now for any questions from our live audience. The recording will be stopped at that point. But before we do, for the people that are tuning on the recording, or audio or video, they'll be available in both formats. You can reach me at nick@nickelston.com. This is NICK at nickelston.com. Zoe?
I'm at, no, I am support at zoethompson.uk, and the website is zoethompson.uk. And I've just dropped a YouTube link into the chat. So for anyone who wants a more formal workshop on how to get out there and make meaningful connections, this is the workshop that I did for Marmalade back in 2023. So
Yes.
that's on YouTube. So I've dropped that into the chat as well. So it's a 45-minute workshop. She's looking at the notes. So 4 different areas to help you to make meaningful connections: connect, confidence, comfort zone, communicate, and challenge yourself to make a change. So that's there for you as well.
Thank you. And those need help references I mentioned, nickelston.com/need hyphen help. Well, all of the, including Zoe actually, all of the need help references are there if you are looking for extra support externally as well. So big thank you to those who tuned up live. Thank you for checking out the recording, both audio and video. Big pleasure to support the Marmalade Trust. From me to Zoe,
You're very
And
welcome.
we'll see you all again soon. Take care, guys. Cheers. Bye bye.